10 things that should be taught in school. Car repair. Much of the same about repairing and maintaining your home applies to repairing and maintaining your automobile. Regular maintenance can save on repair bills, things like changing the oil so many miles. Also, changing the oil and oil filter yourself is an additional way to save money. Maintaining proper air pressure in the tires helps gas mileage go farther, and knowing how to change a tire can mean the difference between being stuck on the side of the road for an extended period of time or it just being a momentary setback. Repairs and maintenance are inevitable for anyone who drives a vehicle for any reasonable length of time, and as such, it would be helpful if these skills were taught to students, given that quite literally almost everyone will encounter such issues. Also, knowing which vehicle to buy and which to avoid based on their performance and safety ratings and which holds the most resale value are all good things to know. How to survive without certain technology. With the advent and popularity of smartphones and e-readers, mechanical watches and books are becoming rarer. The first pocket watches were made with only one hand. While this is antique, it is beneficial to know how to read modern analog clocks. Watches that are automatic will never need a battery and will last hundreds of years if taken good care of. One benefit to reading paper books is that older books can still be read, which are usually not in any e-reader form. They can be borrowed, traded, and gifted. They don't need to be charged. They can be signed and annotated. There's no update or platform or file typing compatibilities. We fear that the popularity of e-readers will mean that old books will cease to be read, which will mean that we'll be cut off from our ancestors, which will mean the first generation in history which will exist on an island annexed from common traditional humanity in many ways. Meditation. This one really is a no-brainer, and it should be implemented into school curriculums for various reasons. One of these reasons is health, and the benefits in this area are well established in scientific literature. An 8-week study conducted by Harvard researchers at Massachusetts General Hospital, for example, recently determined that the brain will literally begin to rebuild itself in just 8 weeks. It's the very first study to document that meditation produces changes over time in the brain's gray matter, and you can access that study and read more about it here. Another example comes from a study conducted by researchers at Johns Hopkins. They found that just 8 weeks of meditation training was as effective as medication in treating anxiety, depression, and pain. According to The Art of Living, which is an educational and humanitarian movement engaged in stress management and service initiatives, these techniques could improve intuition, enhance sensory abilities, improve awareness and foresight, increase confidence, remove the fear of the unknown, and increase creativity and intelligence. They've seen this through their own experience and through the immense success of their program, which could easily be replicated by schools. Effective communication. We don't mean giving speeches and presentations, although that certainly falls into this category. We're mainly talking about being able to clearly take what's in your head and put it into words so the person clearly understands what you're saying the first time. We know that sounds simple, but we're sure you've met people in the workplace who don't take the time to prepare when they speak with you and as a result waste your time talking in circles when all you want to say to them is, "Can you take some time to think through what you want to say and come back to me later with that?" Communicating effectively is one of the most underrated yet most powerful skills you can develop. The biggest part in communicating effectively is preparing what you want to say beforehand. Keep it simple. What's my point? Why? Prepare a good example. Your best friend in communicating effectively are these 2 words. For example. Whenever you see a confused look on people's faces, your best response is leading with those 2 words. For example. When you do that and follow up with a relevant example, it allows the other person to frame what you're talking about to get a better idea of what it is. Communicating effectively is one of the most underrated and most valuable skills a person can have. And let me tell you, on a personal level, there's nothing more refreshing than dealing with people who take the time to prepare what they have to say and back it up with clear examples. It's a very rare skill nowadays. Finance. Okay, so most of us came out of school knowing how to make horrible cupcakes in a mandatory cooking lesson, but when it came to doing our taxes, we were screwed. Every week or so, there always seems to be a new article in CNN, USA Today, or Yahoo about young adults struggling with debt, whether it be from credit cards or loans in general. High interest rates, hidden fees, not consolidating debt, these terms and concepts are mostly unknown to young adults, and because of that ignorance, they tend to make big errors in judgment. A prime example is thinking that they just have to pay the minimum on their balance and not realizing that by doing so, they pay 2 to 3 times as much in the long run. Alongside that, most young adults don't have a clue on how to invest their money. They don't know what a Roth IRA account is, or a 401k, or the magic of compound interest, the tax benefits associated with investing in these types of vehicles, etc. There's a lot of specialized knowledge out there that young adults are not aware of when it comes to how they can better invest their money, and as a result, they frivolously spend it away. Credit score is another big thing. A lot of young adults don't bother to check on it to make sure there are no errors with it. Your credit score is your report card in the real world, and it comes into play when you're buying a car, renting your first apartment, and even when you're getting a job. Most employers are now checking credit scores to determine how responsible the candidate is. Protect that at all costs. Learn what drives your credit score down. Learn what drives your credit score up. Check up on it every now and then to ensure nothing is wrong with it. Filmmaking. Let's face facts here. The entertainment industry is getting larger and easier to get into, so even if it's an option to offer to students, it could make them achieve their dream job by giving them an early education into the filmmaking industry. Many public schools do offer drama classes as electives, but these usually focus on stage performance. As important as it is for any serious actor to know how to act in live shows, many of these students would very much like to try their hands at making motion pictures, yet don't have an outlet for it. A lot of high school students would love to be directors, and most of them idolize Steven Spielberg. He's about as close to God as you get in Tinseltown, yet Spielberg didn't formally study filmmaking until college. But imagine how much faster he would have progressed in his filmmaking abilities had he been able to receive instruction in middle school or high school. To be fair, geniuses of his caliber are typically self-taught, but proper instruction from a good teacher, along with diligent study, are far more reliable and desirable than raw talent and trial and error. For the mere mortals among us, enrolling in a filmmaking class in middle or high school is the most logical choice if we wish to pursue that dream. Such enrollment also offers us a fair chance of getting noticed by any of the bigwig connections the instructor may have. Fiction writing. Ask any elementary school student and he or she will affirm that making up stories is fun. And since Stephen King is quite wealthy from doing so, education and practice in fiction composition is not irrelevant to society. College students across all majors admit that fiction writing courses, whether electives or required, are among their very favorites. After all, you finally get to write what you want to write and not some tedious, insipid essay about how Holden Caulfield is some brooding intellectual, or an essay thoroughly devoid of anything interesting precisely because your teachers require you to examine the facts and draw your conclusions like a robot. Hamlet can teach us a wealth about morality, human nature, existentialism, and politics. Shakespeare is showing us what happens if we give free rein to vengeance. Our whole lives and those of all who are close to us are destroyed. When students in high school finish reading Hamlet, provided they have good teachers who can help them understand and appreciate it, most of them are sufficiently enthralled to try writing fiction, as well they should be. But most of them give up when their first stories turn out to be less great than those of Shakespeare. This is not due to middling talent, but an absence of instruction in fiction writing. Skepticism. Pretty much anything good in life comes from uncertainty or a state of not knowing. Uncertainty is what drives you to become curious, to learn, to test new ideas, to communicate your intentions to others. It's what keeps you humble. It helps you accept whatever comes along. It allows you to see others without unfair judgments and biases. Pretty much anything bad in life comes from certainty, complacency, arrogance, bigotry, and unfair prejudice. Listen, people don't get together and form religious cults and then drink cyanide-laced Kool-Aid because they're uncertain about something. They do it because they're certain. Governments don't starve and murder millions of their own citizens because of uncertainty. They do it because of certainty. People don't fall into deep depression, obsessively stalk their ex, or shoot up a school because they're uncertain about themselves. They do it because they're certain. They're certain in a belief that, like almost every other belief, is probably wrong. Skepticism cultivates the ability to open yourself to alternatives, to withhold judgment, to question and challenge yourself, and make yourself a better person. You don't actually know if Susie at work hates you or not. You don't actually know whether your boss is a dick or just bad at communicating. Maybe his wife has cancer or something and he stays up crying all night. Maybe you're the dick and you don't even know it. You don't really know if gay marriage will ruin the fabric of society or whether men and women really are so different or the same. You don't know if that new job will make you happy, if getting married will fix your relationship problems. We're betting on no. Or whether or not your kid really deserves all those participation trophies. Life is lived in the uncertainties. Our certainties are just strategies we use to avoid that life, to avoid adapting and changing and flowing through it. Because education and learning shouldn't end when the last textbook slams shut or when the diplomas are handed out. It should only end when we do. Relationships. Communicating your feelings without blaming or judging each other, how to spot manipulative behavior and cut it off, personal boundaries and not being a pushover, honest discussions about sexuality and how it relates or doesn't relate to love, fuck yes consent and how the experiences of men and women differ. Basically, everything most of us learn by going through excruciating breakup after excruciating breakup. Because when you're in bed dying of nutsack cancer, you're not thinking about how Napoleon got overzealous in Russia or how the Mekai Restoration totally changed the face of Asian geopolitics or how organic compounds are conspiring to make your brain rot. What you are thinking about are the ones you've loved in your life and the ones you've lost. Many things make for a happy life, but few things have as much influence and impact as our relationships do. Learning how to not stumble through them like a drunken asshole and how to exercise some conscious control over how you express your emotions and intimacy is possibly the most life-changing skill set we've ever come across. Because we're not just talking about how to get wifeyed and have sexy time, we're talking about capital R, relationships, how to be a good friend, how to not treat your family like dog shit, how to deal with conflict at work, how to take responsibility for your own emotions and problems and neuroses without dragging the rest of the world down with you. Listen, as humans, we're fundamentally social animals. We don't exist in a vacuum. We can't. Our social bonds make up the fabric of our life. The question is, are you made of smooth silk or cheap polyester? Proper nutrition. This is a big one, especially since food today faces many issues which were absent just 1 or 2 generations ago. Today, much of our food is genetically modified and sprayed with harmful pesticides. While countries in Europe are banning, as well as publishing studies showing the potential negative health and environmental effects of GMOs, North America is teaching children that GMOs are necessary to combat climate change and global hunger. The GMO debate aside, schools are littered with processed, unhealthy foods, featuring vending machines filled with disease-causing sugar and cafeterias filled with junk food. This not only contributes to the epidemics of obesity and disease which plague the Western world, the United States in particular, but also sets children up for a lifetime of nutritional deficiencies and poor eating habits. Classes about proper nutrition and global food issues are woefully lacking in the education system. Even when they do exist and are not mandatory, which they should be, they rely on food guides released by the government, which have been paid for by the food industry and whose recommendations have been proven to be problematic. Proper nutrition is obviously vital for children's mental stamina and focus, as well as their emotional and physiological health. The bottom line is, school lunches today are setting kids up for a wide range of diseases as they enter into adulthood. We as a society are then paying both the literal and figurative costs of this neglect.